Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Mia Burke, and I work as program manager with Hanford Challenge. And if you're not familiar, Hanford Challenge is a nonprofit based in Seattle that advocates for a safe and effective cleanup of the Hanford nuclear site. And the most important thing we do and what makes us unique is our support of workers on the front lines of cleanup. This is our 33rd webinar of our Nuclear Waste Scholar Series, which is pretty exciting. If you are new to the series, we started it to inspire action and involvement with Hanford Cleanup by inviting speakers to share groundbreaking scholarship, art, research, and experience working with nuclear waste. And we have almost all of the previous presentations uploaded to our YouTube channel, so be sure to check those out if you are curious. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Gabe Bohnee. Gabe is currently an environmental risk specialist for the Nez Perce Tribe's Department of Natural Resources Environmental Restoration and Waste Management Program. He is a tribal member of the Nez Perce Tribe living in Lapwai, Idaho. Gabe is a family man with a wife of 27 years and 4 adult children, also currently raising a granddaughter with his wife at the family home. Gabe graduated from Lewis Clark State College in Lewiston, Idaho. As a heads up, if you can't stick around for the whole presentation, feel free to leave. We will be recording the presentation and we'll share a link of the recording with everyone that registered. Thank you so much for joining us today, Gabe. I will pass it to you now to talk about your work and experience.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Gabe Bohnee. My Indian name is Peetslotukt. It's actually my middle name, and I was named at birth from my great aunt. And from what I get, it means it has a deciphering as invincible. So it's good. It's kind of fit as I've been able to take these challenges on as I've grown up and being raised in a good family home. I was raised a lot by my grandparents, and I wanted to give a special shout out to my grandfather who has passed on, but today would have been his 101st birthday, and he has been an inspiration in me, really going down this path at Hanford. Once I got rooted, as he was a World War II veteran in the engineering battalions, 529th Engineering Battalion, and got deployed into the Pacific Theater and actually got to Japan after the bomb at Nagasaki and went into Nagasaki after the detonation of the bomb. So he didn't talk about it a lot personally, but he did bring some of those thoughts out a little bit more, and help me understand and helping my understanding of his feelings as being Native American and in a foreign country where most of the he looked a lot more like the people that were there rather than the U.S. soldiers, and so his love for the children and how things were looking, he had a really hard time during that time. But yeah, like I said, he was a proud World War II veteran, and I always knew he was because he had a sword, actually a Japanese sword that was in our basement that sat there, and I always would take a look at it and want to play with it, but it sat there and had its place. Um, Moving forward, the introduction said, I live here in Lapwai, Idaho. I'm a Nez Perce tribal member, and the Nez Perce tribe is here located in north central Idaho. Our traditional lands encompass out from here into Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, in areas that we had a our way of life that we lived in utilizing those areas. So our first interaction with the federal government, was through Lewis and Clark, and those first interactions and deals with the government. As you can go into history and you can see, uh, go to the Smithsonian and see, a Jefferson Peace Medal that was given during that time when Lewis and Clark came out as an offering as they passed through all these tribal nations. that came through, a grave getting dug up here locally. So, that was our first interaction with the U.S. Subsequently, we made it to 1855. And which is very vital to us is that we, as Nez Perce, we always point to the Treaty of 1855 and in our with the United States, as that's where we did in exchange. We always put that phrase in exchange for these lands that we're ceding, which we call ceded areas. Uh, we we reserve the right to hunt, gather, and fish in our usual and accustomed areas of the Nez Perce tribe. So with that, we did keep up on those ways, in those highways, to do commerce in those areas. So that's a wide expanse. As we were up and down the Columbia. We were in the plains areas, hunting buffalo. So we have a wide swath of land that we consider our usual and accustomed areas that we hold near and dear. And it's seen by today's maps. If you go to Yellowstone National Park, you can see Joseph Creek, you can see Looking Glass Creek. These are some of the names of the chiefs, because during the flight of 1877, we call it the flight. The United States will call it the War of 1877 with the Nez Perce. We actually went through an active national park. It was a national park at that time, in our flight to try to get to Canada during that time. So, we get taught these things as a kid. As kids growing up, I had the luxury of growing, like I said, growing up with a World War II veteran that was very involved with and really integrated into our battle sites. My grandfather, his name is Horace Axtell. His Indian name is Loomps, and his Indian name actually comes from one of the warriors that was killed at the Battle of the Bear Paw in Montana, up 40 miles south of the Canadian border, outside of Havre, Montana. So, like I said, we get inundated with a lot of history when we're growing up. It's a great way to grow up, because this history is a part of us. And land and areas and places, names are very important to us, and we've taken that in Hanford is one of those regions that we hold as it was a very high commerce, high trading places. In my travels for my work, I've heard it, to the equivalent of St. Louis. As the St. Louis has the Ohio River and the Missouri flowing in right into the Mississippi right there. The Tri-Cities is the same way, with the Snake flowing up, the Walla Walla just to the south, and the Yakima flowing off the other end. So, um, the Nez Perce tribe, currently, we've been involved since the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, when that came into effect, looking for repository sites for the high level waste uh, for the United States. And as people know, Rattlesnake Mountain on site was selected as one of the pilot projects to go under an examination and move forward, and actually made it into another round, and actually had test digging and pushing into the mountain to test the materials inside. Luckily, at that time, there was great push by the tribes, especially by the Yakima Nation, to cease this. The Nez Perce were involved in that also, and we did have a small program, which we just named after the project. We here at the Nez Perce tribe, in our history that we found documents. It's just called the BWIP project, for the Basalt Waste Isolation Project. That we were actually involved and had a little newsletter, and keeping tribal members up to date on the activities there. So with the signing, moving on, like I said, Nuclear Waste Policy Act, CERCLA was developed in 1980 under the 86 SARA amendments. I forget, I always forget what acronyms are horrible. So in defining them, I just use so the amendments in 86. And through these actions, the tribes were deemed as Hanford affected areas that went moving forward. So having that kind of stand or acknowledgement, and then getting into the era where the tri-party agreement came forth, we weren't a party to that agreement, but it did impact the tribes and we hold those relationships with all three of those tri-party agencies, with the EPA and the laws that they are set to regulate, with the state of Washington and what they regulate, and with the Department of Energy as the primary at the Hanford site. So we moved forward with that, and I believe it was 1991, we really put forth to have our own tribal programs, and DOE had obliged, and in those times we came forward, and we do get annual cooperative agreement funds that move to fund our work to be involved with work at the Hanford site. That gets me to high school. I graduated in 1993 from Lewiston High School in Lewiston, Idaho. Um, I I did a summer program in New Mexico that summer right after high school. I didn't get to celebrate and go to the beach. I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and went to college for the summer in a tribal program for tribal youth. But there, I was able to actually didn't realize was expanding my DOE knowledge, and that we visited Sandia Labs a few times, made it to a lot of the pueblos that were around Los Alamos National Lab, and kind of inadvertently began my education on those areas, which I know a lot more about today from just having active involvement in our program since 1993. When I got back from Arizona, I did receive an internship with our office, which is the Environmental Restoration and Waste Management Program for the Nez Perce Tribe. It sounds very long, but that was, I believe, the name of the cooperative agreement funds that they put out. So I believe the Yakima have the same acronym, except they put a slash between the R and the W, so they're the ER/WM program for them. So uh, but my internship was, my first footstep into Hanford. A lot of declassified documents, trying to read with a high school level education. Getting ready to go to college was very tough. But the best part about that was, you know, going under the wings of our tribal elders that were in our program. That our director, her name was Donna Powaki. I had known Donna since I was a little kid, as she used to be the boss for our tribal employment rights office of my mom, who worked in the same office. So I knew her growing up, and her daughters had actually babysat me. So it was nice to be back in fold with her in her program. We had another elder. His name was J. Herman Rubin, and he had been, I believe, on our council, but was our general council chairman for a lot of years, and had a lot of political knowledge and, and such. And when he came in to the Hanford realm, he really looked at the safety, as back then we really wanted to get out there and help in the cleanup efforts with the safety at the site. And so he got involved with what became the Hammer facility, a federal training facility that's out there right now. But the facility didn't come on until 1996. But in 1993, it was driven as a concept and an idea by the Hammer director. She was director from the beginning until 2018 in her retirement. Her name's Karen McGinnis. Um, she began a program, and the very first class was an emergency response program to an incident. It was supposed to be carrying waste up Cabbage Hill in Oregon, and there was three of us interns, Jay Herman Rubin and a few other of our staff, that were in that very first Hammer class. And we got to go out there and work with the state of Oregon, state of Washington, and the other federal partners and local partners in the Tri-Cities on emergency response plan. I don't remember too much about the training, but I'm always reminded about it from Karen when I became a Hammer Steering Committee member later in my life. Karen would always remind everybody that Gabe was one of our very first students, and we're glad that he's here. But the biggest thing I do remember about that time was we did get to go on a tour of the Hanford site. And I always laugh because I don't know how I got on site, because I was still 17 years old. I didn't turn 18 until September of 1993, and it was August of 1993, but we did make it out to the site. Back then, there was a guard station in the 300 area that we had to go through. on the way out there. The biggest thing that stuck out to me was we went to WESF, which is the waste encapsulation storage facility where the strontium and cesium capsules are kept. And they've been decaying since then. But in 1993, when you went in the room, if you go in, the capsules do create a blue hue that goes to the room. And in 1993, it was very Smurf-like. If you go in there today, it's very dull and kind of lame. What you see in what its original looked like back in 1993. So, uh, you know, that's me getting in, and where the tribe has been as we've progressed forward. We've gotten a lot of experience. We've had a lot of staff and trying to get the technical knowledge that we need to have as we move through uh, to answer a lot of the questions that were going on, because those were the early days of the TPA. A lot of interim actions were occurring, environmental impact statements, but a lot of them really were done during that time during my internship, and I did leave the program for a while, and when I did come back, really did hop back into these things because these were important documents. I'm thinking about efforts like the Columbia River component of our CRCIA, which was the Columbia River Injury Assessment, and taking a look at that. And that's, I still view those and some of the data and things that came out of that effort because we're always looking at risk and risk to the environment and how that's impactful. And a lot of those studies really laid the ground for work for what has been gone on subsequently. During that time in 96, there was the Waste Management Programmatic EIS, which set where waste is going, throughout the whole DOE weapons complex, Hanford, INL, Nevada, Los Alamos, Sandia, um, Oak Ridge, Savannah, it's created those locations and where that waste is going to have its final resting place within the DOE complex. So, and that EIS came out during that time. When I finally did come back to the program, the club was coming on, which was the comprehensive land use plan, which was the 50-year plan for Hanford and setting what the use areas were going to be and helped in guiding that risk of how that cleanup was going to occur at those locations. So, like I said, it really wasn't a crazy time. My intern days, I got to learn a lot from folks. We've had great staff, but being a small tribe in our tribal programs, we have people for a while and then we lose them and we lose those expertise. And so we've had to really try to go back and look at what we've accumulated and the knowledge that we move forward as we try to help because as we see ourselves as equal partners as a stakeholder with treaty rights at the site, um, that we want to protect those ways of life, those resources that are on the site. So we have to take that all as we move forward. Um, I went through, I always put kudos back to Hammer. If a lot of my education for what went on at the Hanford site was really done through Hammer. In 2005, I became the director of our ERWM program once I was a specialist and moved forward. But the Hammer Steering Committee became a real training ground for me because there you get to see, how Hanford works because everybody's trying to get education on how to do the best out there at the site. You got tank workers, the tank foremen supervisors are actually your trainers for the staff that are coming in for those special trades that are working in the tank farm. So it's a very grow your own kind of concept and is and I got to see those from a labor union side. The contractors were there, and how they want to do work and who are hiring, the union folks and the scientists, and it really became a really big bed of knowledge. And then with our tribal input on what we want to see, make sure that we're protecting cultural resource areas, are areas that we know of high importance that, hey, maybe we've got to take another look at this concept. It was really a great grounds for trying to get through on there. And, like like I said, back in '93 when I went, the tribes were very involved, and we had some elders that were really big in that. For us, it was J. Herman Rubin. For the Umatillas, it was Bill Burke, who just recently passed this past summer, and Russell Jim from the Yakama Nation, who has passed on since too. But if you can see their names if you go out to Hammer, if you have a reason to go out to get training or right around the site, you'll see some streets are named in their honor because that was their importance to how Hammer developed and became fruition and as an actual site out there on the Hanford reservoir at the Hanford site. Um, as I mentioned, risk, currently I do risk work, and risk is always the biggest factor. You go through college and you get into statistics and you get statistical analysis on risk, and you get into a whole lot of numbers, and that's not really my forte. Hardcore to doing a lot of algebraic equations and such, but I measure, try to look at the risks and how it's affecting the resources that we want, and the long-term effects of how uh, what's going to be left. Once the goals are set for the cleanup, what those remedial performance goals are for the cleanup, the action that's being taken, because things half-life. By the time it's going to be utilized, this is where it's going to be. Um, these are tough challenges, and I was thinking about my time as the RWM director, and when I came on, there was an initiative, a risk-based end states high initiative by the Department of Energy in the 2005 timeframe, for 2004 2005 timeframe. And basically, with the risk-based end states, it was utilizing the model that they used at Rocky Flats, was saying, well, what's the end state that we want for this area? And we'll look at where we want it to be, and then we can you know level off of what we need to do to get to reach that end state. So if it's not clean up this in such an aggressive manner that we let it sit and but put a protective barrier and it'll take care of itself, then that's how we're going to do the work. um that's fine, but we had such a diverse, Rocky Flats is a lot different site from the Hanford site, so there's a lot more nuances, and so I really did get involved in there with risk and saying, hey, here's the tribal voice. We need to be heard in these sessions, and I really did get involved at that time frame and taking a look at to say, hey, this is matching up with what we want. Unfortunately, those conversations didn't go as the tribe uh, had wanted from the perspective of our program. So we internally began to take a look and said, well, what are the standards? Because, with any federal law, there's the federal standard, and then any state or further standard has to meet or exceed those standards. So let's start taking a look at what those basic standards are and what do we want to see further push so that it goes towards our goal, which the ultimate goal of the Nez Perce tribe in our opening statement is to restore Hanford to its pre-Hanford condition, so that we can utilize the resources of the site in the way that we knew as an Nez Perce before the Hanford site. So uh, we did a lot of work. I put the staff then at that time. We put a lot of effort in, and then drafting language for ourselves, because the Nez Perce tribe, we are our own government too. We are bureaucracy, so we have hierarchies that we push things through, and we did get this all the way to our tribal council, who did approve our Nez Perce end state vision, and we've come up with our plan on statements that move forward to push our goals that we want to see at the Hanford site. It didn't get integrated into TPA, but it's there as a guidance document for us to begin our conversations with the Department of Energy, EPA, and the state of Washington. Um, yeah. So, like I said, the tribe has very been risk-based oriented from the beginning. We're currently we're moving forward, and as in I can just say from my perspective, in my time, a lot of work was done on the river corridor from the 90s through the 2015, but the high risk is the tank waste in the central plateau area. And we're glad to see, the work done in glass starting to be formed to stabilize that waste, because we understand the integrity of the tanks, and that those tanks weren't meant to last. They're past their shelf life, and we don't want to see any further damage in waste getting into the soil. So we're uh, everything in this speech this presentation is, from my perspective, and as the tribe, we're still moving forward with how we want to take forward, because I don't speak for the Nez Perce tribe. I'm just a tribal member and a tribal employee. And like I said, we have our avenues that we need to move through. Um, but like I said, we're actively involved. I don't want to get into our current situations, because a lot of government to government interaction is communication, and with any administration change, there's challenges to communication, learning new communication networks, and so we're working on that currently. But in the past, a lot of this communication network has for us has been through work groups that we've worked on. We're a member of the Hanford Advisory Board and have been since its inception. And the big one that I was really involved with was the State Tribal Government Working Group. This is a working group out of the DOE Office of Environmental Management that was begun in the 90, I think 90, 91 timeframe. But it was really the states and tribes coming together and addressing then Energy Secretary Admiral Watkins, and saying they needed a venue to have those high level dialogues with DOE headquarters on what was going on at their sites, on how they move forward. So Stigwig really took fruition when I became after my internship days. I graduated college in 2001 and became an environmental specialist. In 2002, I began my work with the Stigwig, being a tribal staff representative. Uh, Over the years, between 2002 and 2017, I became, the ERWM director. As the director, I did take on the roles of being, we have a tribal issues committee within Stigwig. I became one of our co-chairs for that. And then for our whole group, there's a top state person and a top tribal person. They're called the co-convener. And I did serve as the tribal co-convener during my time when I was the ERWM director too. So but there, like I said, we're able to address a lot of the issues, and we actually did break down to Stigwig level meetings for our sites, and trying to find out, so we're doing by committee before we meet, nationally, and we'd meet twice a year. We usually meet twice a year nationally at sites across the country. So um, I don't know. I'm there. There's a lot. I know people, about tribal involvement. We are involved because of our relationship with the United States as a in our treaties and what we're trying to protect. We've had like I said, Nuclear Waste Policy Act, the CERCLA, RCRA, these things that affect us. But we create those relationships with those TP agencies. Like I said, with DOE as the primary responsible party, and EPA and Washington Ecology as regulators. But a lot of our work is risk-wise is getting communication networks, and then being able to ask the right questions to get what our technical questions are in those areas, as we try to protect I don't want, I think our main focus is the Columbia River, because that Columbia River is our lifeblood here for us in the Northwest, as we try to protect salmon and the many resources it protects, and all the other resources up and down the river. So with that, I'm glad to take questions. I know I've tried to keep it small, because I could talk, people start asking me questions. I think I could talk for, Hanford all day, every day, because there's so many nuances to Hanford. I guess I did forget that from 2017 to 2023, I did leave the tribe, and I did work on the small business side in federal contracting with contracts at Hanford and other sites across the United States for DOE, DOD. What was I forget? Oh, the Army Corps of Engineers, and you know uh, that's an important piece because I try to think project wise when DOE is trying to make a decision. They're taking in our tribal perspective, but there's behind the doors, there's so many relationships they deal with, with their prime contractors. I worked for a small business, so we were a subcontractor and doing work, and we had to help them with their relationships with union groups to do certain tasks out at the site, which was very good for my hammer days to create a lot of those relationships, and we were doing work out at the site. Um, it's just a very complex network of activities that go on what goes on at the Hanford site, and I tried to learn the best I could so that I could make the tribe the most effective moving forward. So with that, I think I did about a half hour, and I'm definitely open to answering any questions.
Thank you so much, Gabe. We have questions coming through already, but if others have questions, please put them either in the chat or you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Um, the first question is, given the current federal government, what are the biggest challenges you face now?
Um, the biggest challenges, like I said, is communications and uh, through the activities of the current administration and people being gone, trying to keep an update of who's still on the roster for our agencies. And we're wanting to keep our activities moving forward. Another aspect is what the administration currently calls is deregulating work uh, is causing some risk factors for us as we try to figure out, well, what does that mean? How's that going to impact us? Just within the last week, we've seen a hearing on the National Historic Preservation Act, which governs Section 106 in activities, which is a cornerstone of what our cultural resources groups utilize at Hanford to go out and protect cultural resources and natural resources at the site. Um, I know we're looking at Section 110, which is just monitoring the known resources, cultural resources that we have, and historic resources, and making sure that those are safe. These are things the tribes are very active in. Our perspective is very circular, that we're trying to protect this for our future generations, and it goes in a circular fashion. Our challenge is dealing with policies and a government that deals with things in a linear fashion.
Mhm.
There's a beginning and an end, and it doesn't move in a circle, which is a cultural difference, but things that we have to come through as we deal with the federal government and in other governments that we deal with.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. We have a question about small modular nuclear reactors, and whether the Nez Perce tribe supports plans to site these reactors at the Hanford site um, along the Columbia River.
The Nez Perce tribe doesn't have an official position on the small modular reactors. If you're reading the papers, the Nez Perce tribe has been very involved with a group we called Save the Orcas. It was dealing with salmon runs and dwindling salmon runs, eh, paper wise, we're very involved in looking at the four lower Snake River dams, and part of that removal was to take a look at alternative energy sources. So we were looking at a lot of wind, a lot of solar projects. I'm not too sure where they were as where we're at as a tribe, but looking at nuclear possibilities to offset what the loss would be from hydropower generation. But it's there. It's to be studied and yet to be determined. But even though we were watching projects getting approved and moving forward, we're playing catch up as we usually are and looking at these issues. And it's not the purview of our office as the ERWM,
Mm.
but we do put our 2 cents in as tribal members into who are on those committees to give the best knowledge that we know as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you. Um, do you recommend, could you share with us, it doesn't have to be right now, but a website to keep, to stay updated on the tribe's policies and any suggestions for writing comments? If that's done, does your office do suggestions for writing comments for the official comment periods for the public
Uh,
or anything?
our policies, we have an internal process. So, we have our nestperch.org site that has, outlines what we do as a tribe. We don't put our policies, well, we have our law and order codes and for certain areas, we have what we've put out there thus far. I think for the RWM, we have our end state vision and policies that we've pushed forward. Um, a lot of our activity is just receiving from either from the department, the tri parties, and then trying to respond back if we want to officially respond back on those areas. And we definitely take a lot of information, sit in a lot of the groups, have Stigwig, and as we try to develop what our appropriate response should be to those
Mhm.
areas.
Yeah, and I dropped nespers.org into the chat for everyone. Um, some DOE plans to remove nuclear spent fuel from closed reactor sites include moving it to Hanford, supposedly temporarily. How does the Nez tribe and you feel about that?
We just had that question. We were going over that question internally, and like I had in my narrative was regarding the waste management programmatic EIS, which was done in 1996. Hanford was slated to take in low level and mixed low level waste, and that could happen from other sites. Um, then there was the tank closure EIS, and then it didn't work out so well. So how they wanted, so they came up with the tank closure waste management EIS, which was done in 2011 or 2013. And in there was a caveat that Hanford would not accept other sites' waste until the waste treatment plant started. So that begins the conversation of, okay, you've activated the waste treatment plant. So what are those conversations? And since it's the startups happened on October 15th, and we've been in a government shutdown, we haven't been able to have that kind of discussion on if DOE is looking at those and how that may go impact the future
Mhm.
for the Hanford site. But we know that avenue is there. But we're looking, I try to balance things out and say, hey, well, they're looking at these other projects where we're going to send 31 to 32 million gallons of waste to offsite for low level waste disposal at a commercial facility. So we is that correct or is that not correct? We haven't come up with a determination on that because we still have reservations a lot about transportation of liquid waste, even though it's in a low form. And we, like I said, our expanded Nez Perce tribal usual and custom areas expand beyond our reservation here in north central Idaho. That we have fishermen along the Columbia and down the freeways going that way. We have relationships with CTIR. We have family members that live there going over Cabbage Hill. We have family members in the Spokane area. We know Spokane, the city of Spokane is very opposed to floating down I-90. we hunt buffalo in Montana, and in eastern Idaho. So, our expanse area and the impact of the Nez Perce tribe is very wide and far. So we try to keep that all in perspective as we internalize these and put the best recommendations for our council to consider.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Um, what surprised you most about Hanford cleanup since you first started learning about Hanford?
Oh, I mean, the Hanford cleanup, and people, I talk to people here locally, and when I talk about Hanford, and they're always worried about the radionuclides. Oh, well, I don't want to get nuked. They want Simpsons or whatever, and they're more worried about the radionuclides. And they kind of, well, what bugs you the most? And what bugs me the most are the chemicals that supported the nuclear operations out there. Those have the most mobility, the most impact, and where you see a lot of the work being done is on a lot of those chemicals that were utilized for degreasing or helping the process, the water through the reactors. A lot of those got into the river. They got into the soils along the river, or they're like TCE. It's at the bottom in the 200 areas, and these are very hard, complex issues that are still being researched today. That how are we going to clean those up? Or we just are, there's no answer for those right now. So.
Yeah. Um, so question about nuclear testing, and I think this comes from recent news, but what are your concerns about further nuclear testing?
Um, I personally, I believe in the technology, that we run these simulations, and like I said, part of my Stigwig work and other activities, I was able to get out to the Nevada test site. And once you get on, uh, up above on the northern Nevada test site, and you see how many holes are out there, there's been numerous tests. I think there's 130 above our explosions. It's a whole lot of explosions that have occurred, and was able to make it out to Sedan crater, which was the largest underground nuclear test that was performed in Nevada. And it's got, I believe it's like a half-mile wide crater in the ground. We've done the testing, and so there's really no reason to kind of persist down that avenue. That I believe the simulations work well, and I've seen the debate, online debate, and everybody talking about it. But I think it's just more about the delivery systems and making sure that delivery systems work, because the actual bond work, I know we produce the materials to be able to make it, the actual bomb work. I've been to Pantex, been to Oak Ridge, seeing where the tritium it goes. So the whole system's in place. It As far as testing, we haven't done it since 1992, I believe, and I'm not even too sure. Like I said, I was probably still in high school then, and I wasn't aware of what that kind of testing was back in those days. But I hopefully we put the best foot forward and rely on the science rather than trying to do a demonstration. And that's just a perspective of Gabe Bohnee having been around nuclear waste since high school. So.
Yeah, thank you. Related to your previous answer, what are the names of some of the chemicals you're talking about, and how do they impact health?
Oh, uh, geez. I can't think of what the chemical was put in, but it's put in the reactors. I think K reactors are the best examples. You had the pump house that pumped water to the basins that were to the south of the reactor. As you go north and pushing water through the reactors, you added yeah, is it sodium dichromate? My hydrogeologist is probably sitting down in our conference room, laughing at me because they're watching. But to minimize, the sticking and chemically to keep the water pushing past the on the outside pipe, and you had the inside pipe with the rod that was being irradiated, so it was cooling the reaction. Well, you needed that smooth flow of water so it didn't gum up and cause issues. But that uh, chromium has leaked out, in the whether it's the basin failed at the head, or if it failed in the basin at the end. That's what gets into the soil and what is causing issues that went into the ground. I know there's actually an K, I guess it'd be east. There's an active pump and treat operation to try to pump that chromium out to as it's the source. They haven't found the source, but it keeps growing and activating itself, and is continued to be a problem in costing a lot of money to. And once they think they minimize it or neutralize it, it seems to rebuild itself. So just things like that, that those chemicals that you add in. So
Yeah, thank you. Do you get any questions from young people in your life about Hanford? What do they ask about?
you know, I haven't been since I've been back to the program. I haven't been around the young kids, but I do ask my kids, and unfortunately, it's been a comfortable for them that they haven't had to worry about issues like this if they're not directly involved. And they like, oh, dad's off to another meeting, and I try to explain, and it gets technical, and in areas that they're not worried about. But I think maybe with the potential rise of a nuclear threat again, maybe that urgency will come back to learn. But I think just trying to get our youth into science, technology, engineering, mathematic fields to help us, because we need more hydrologists. We need more folks that are dealing with what we need help with out at the site, as we're looking at these long-term problems from waste in the soils. And like I said, a lot of them are chemically based, so it's a lot more chemistry and how you get things to move. So
Yeah, thanks. Um, do you have any favorite resources, books, articles, videos, interviews for people who may want to learn more about the Nez Perce and Hanford?
uh yeah, I have, like I said, I couldn't get my PowerPoint up, but I do have, here is a book about my grandfather. It's called A Little Bit of Wisdom, and it was the first book written by a Nez Perce, about their life since in over 50 years when it came out. And it was just really a good thing to. I had to reread it over the last week because it had been about 10 or 15 years since I read the book, but it really gets into our dynamics is growing up Nez Perce, and our ways that we had traditionally in his time in the third 20s and 30s, when he's a little kid. There was already a dynamic shift of how people, our tribal folks, did things. We have here for the Nez Perce tribe, we were, if you come to our area, we have Spalding National Park. This is where Henry Spalding was sent out by the U.S. government to Christianize the Nez Perce tribe. And in that movement, Chief Joseph was taught by Reverend Spalding, and learned English. So that's why he had such a great dynamic of in aggressiveness with the U.S. language when we were doing negotiations. But we have the Presbyterian Church is really, we have 4 or 5 Presbyterian churches here on the Nez Perce Reservation. We have other religions. We have our Waleset, our traditional religion. We have the Native American church. So we get a lot of inundation of all these things, and we're a small community. So our interactions, how our own schisms and our internal battles of how we push things forward and trying to keep our culture is very, very good. So he gets into that. There's a lot of more of our books are historical and really do center on the War of 1877. And personally, I think, as a tribe, we really relate to that too, because we have chiefs that were during the treaty making area. So there's, you get around, there's Chief Whitebird, Chief Joseph, Chief Looking Glass. We always say, well, I'm descended from Chief Looking Glass, or we have these things and families that we're descended from, and how we go about it. So there's a book called The Nez Perce Indians in the Opening of the Northwest. Actually, I have my book right here, so I always look at it because you never know much. But it was by Alvin M. Josephi, and he did a really good analysis of the Nez Perce tribe and through those Presbyterian years and what we did. Trying to think what other books there are. We did have one internally for us. Treaties and an Nez Perce perspective, and that was done by our office that we produced in the 90s. I'm not too sure if there's copies out there floating. I think we had the last of them, but there's great books to take a look at. There's a lot of documentaries. If you look on the internet, we do a lot with horses. There's some the Appaloosa. We adopted the Appaloosa into our culture when the Spanish brought horses, and we were able to gain the horse. We were very good horsemen, and it's written well by Lewis and Clark in their journals, talking about Nez Perce warriors riding down the sides of hills, running down the hill full blast on a horse without a saddle. It's just part of our history. You can go back to Lewis and Clark journals too to learn about Nez Perce, because we're written about in there and what we did back in those days. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing some of those books and resources for us. We have a question about how things have changed over time, since you first started at Hanford in terms of DOE's relationship with the Nez Perce tribe and engaging the tribe consultation. Has that changed since you first started, or has it remained pretty much the same?
It's a dynamic relationship based on administrations, within the last 10 to 15 years. Um, I mean, even when I was the director, thinking relationships would be great under, a certain administration. They didn't go as fast as I wanted them to. So, but that has been a main topic of our Stigwig, is just consultation and communication with the Nez Perce tribe and the tribes in general. We break it down into what we call little C and big C. Little C is a consultation, more of a just communication in dialogue, at the appropriate levels as staff. But consultation is when we officially bring our leadership in and have high level meetings with either the site management or with DC officials or with senators at their level, because we don't do that as staff, or we're there to support our leadership as we move forward. So it's been pretty dynamic. There was great things done in when I first came on. Bill Clinton brought out Executive Order 13175 with consultation with the American Indian tribes. The DOE had its uh, American Indian policy. They went through a rewrite of that, and then we said, well, you have a policy, but you have no plan for it. So in 2006, we developed a framework for the American Indian policy and how they had to enhance it, which they did. Finally, in 2009, turned it into a DOE order 144.1. So they actually have their own internal law within DOE and how they're supposed to interact with the tribes. So that's always under consideration for revamping or adjusting it. And it was in that process prior to the administration change, and it'll probably be another year or two in the making before we hit that next iteration of those conversations.
Yeah.